Okay, so good afternoon and good morning. I think I can say both. And welcome to today's seminar that will be about different approaches to manage spruce with examples from both Canada and Sweden. And this webinar is arranged by IUFRO, the Unit 118, Ecology and Silviculture of Spruce, which I'm coordinating together with my colleagues Brad Pino from University of Alberta and Nelson Tifo, Natural Resources Canada. And my name is Karin Hjelm, and I'm working at Skogforsk in Sweden as a researcher. And at today's webinar, we have 3 presentations, and the speakers will be introduced prior to their presentations. And we would like to make you aware that we are recording this webinar. And if you have any questions, please write them in the chat. You see it in the bottom of the screen. There is this bubble chat. And before I will give the floor to the presenters, I will give you a short presentation on IUFRO, since this is organized through the organization. So I will share my screen here and hope that it works. So you see my presentation?
Yes.
Good. So IUFRO, that's the International Union of Forest Research Organizations. And it's a global network of forest science collaboration. Okay, and now I'd like to switch slides. Okay. So what is IUFRO? It's a non-profit, non-governmental international network of forest scientists, and it has its headquarters in Vienna, in Austria. And it's a global network for voluntary collaboration that is open to all individuals and organizations that are dedicated to forest and forest products research and related disciplines. And how does IUFRO work then? Well, IUFRO advances research excellence and knowledge sharing, and it fosters development of science-based solutions to forest-related challenges for the benefits of forests and people worldwide. It provides a diverse thematic structure for forest-related research. Within this structure, scientists can collaborate on a voluntary basis. It addresses research needs and priorities of its members and stakeholders, including policy and decision makers, practitioners, industry, and the civil society. The network structure looks like this. There are 9 divisions, more than 60 research groups, and more than 180 working parties. There are 13 task forces and 4 special programs and projects. So, as you saw, there are 9 different divisions, and our unit belongs to the Division 1, Silviculture. And then there are also those task forces that are established on a temporary basis and focus on emerging key issues. And they organize meetings and workshops and could publish books or special issues of peer-reviewed journals, and so on. IUFRO also publish things in several formats. So there is, for example, this IUFRO World Series, publishing occasional papers and also podcasts. So if you now would like to get involved, if you're not involved yet, you should go to the website iufro.org and learn more about IUFRO. You can look under our work to learn more about the different divisions and units and the task forces as well. Find out more about IUFRO under the main bodies. You can look for different events, such as this, for example. There are links to publications, news, and medias. And to become a member or office holder, you press Get Involved. So some of the benefits of being a member is that you expand your network, you get access to different types of expertise, you can exchange knowledge, gain visibility, and make an impact, receive awards, and benefit from different grants. So that was shortly about IUFRO. So now it's time for the first presentations. So I will give the word to Brad.
Thanks, Karen. So my name's Brad Pinto. I'm Associate Professor of Silviculture at the University of Alberta, involved in the IUFRO Spruce group here. So it's this is the first time we've done an event like this, so it's really great to see all the people that we have here online. We weren't sure what it was going to be, but this is really exciting for us to have everybody joining us here today to hear from three pretty amazing graduate students about some of the research that they are doing. When we put this together, one of the things that we liked about it was we're going to hear about spruce from around the world. We're going to hear about white spruce from Alberta, black spruce from Quebec, Norway spruce from Sweden. That's pretty neat. Some of the similarities, some of the differences, but that's one of the things that I like about this. And the only other thing I want to mention before we get into the speakers is just kind of echo what Karen mentioned about if you're interested in getting more involved, if you're interested in some of the work that's going on here, please reach out to any of us panelists here, and we can kind of take it from there. So with that, I'm going to introduce our first speaker. So Aakriti Gautam is a Master of Science student here at the University of Alberta, although not for much longer, because she will be defending her thesis in a couple of months. So she's getting towards the end of her journey. But she's going to be talking about the management of juvenile white spruce in boreal mixed woods in Alberta. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Aakriti.
Thank you, Brad. Let me see. Is my screen visible?
Not yet. While Akriti's getting her presentation up, last thing I'll mention is if folks do have any questions, please write them in the chat and we'll address them at the end of each of the seminars here. So if any questions that come up, you can put it in the chat and we'll get to them through there. Perfect.
Okay. Am I audible? Yeah, okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Aakriti Gautam, currently in the second year of my master's, pretty much wrapping things up. So yeah, first of all, I want to thank Brad, Nelson, and Karin for this opportunity. So yeah, today I will be presenting few findings from my research where we looked at the short-term growth responses of white spruce following pre-commercial thinning. And this was done in boreal mixwoods. And this research was supported by Forest Resource Improvement Association of Alberta and Vanderbilt contractors. And in abstract, I did mention few results on aspen, but today I will only be focusing on spruce. Now let's get it started. So before I jump onto my research, I want to talk a little bit on the ecological traits of white spruce and how it is managed here in Alberta. So as we know, white spruce is a widely distributed conifer across the boreal forest region, and we can find it growing alongside with various other species. But here in Alberta, it is mostly associated with trembling aspen. They are the dominant pairing and the common species mixers here. When it comes to set tolerance, white spruce can remain under the canopy for several years. But the thing is, it does that in a suppressed state, which means upper canopy largely influences the growth of the spruce underneath. And in Alberta, that upper canopy is mostly trembling aspen. Since aspen, it is a fast-growing species, it quickly closes the canopy, and as a result, spruce underneath, it ends up getting whatever light passes through. And this is where silvicultural treatments like pre-commercial thinning is important, because it reduces the density of the stand, it opens up the canopy during their early developmental phase, so that the individual retained trees can have more access to the growing space and more available resources. But if we look into the past management practices here in Canada, PCT here has been concentrated mostly in regenerating softwood stands, and this is because of their dominance and higher economic importance. More recently, however, it is being considered in boreal mixwoods as well. In Alberta specifically, there has been research where studies have explored various thinning intensities, its effect on growth responses, and also its effect on drought resiliency. But still, in an operational setting, we can find managers prioritizing the retention of white spruce over aspen. And this is because, as I said earlier, softwood products are highly valuable. And also, there is this competitive as well as facilitative interaction between these two components, which has made the mixed management more challenging. So, in one hand, higher aspen density can lead the stand to hardwood dominated, which is often not desirable. But also, on the other hand, presence of aspen, it helps spruce by moderating microclimate, by reducing frost risk, and also their nutrient-rich leaf litter helps in improving the soil. So yeah, there is this trade-off in improving the spruce growth and maintaining the positive effects of aspen in these mixed stands. Now, talking about my sites, they were pre-commercially thinned back in 2022. So it has only just been 3 years since thinning. The drone image here on the left, it shows the clear contrast between a pre-commercially thin site and a control one. As you can see on the right side of the image, there is this high density of trees and their canopies are also tightly packed together. While on the left side of the image, their thinning has opened up the canopy, and now these trees can have more access to the resources and growing space. And that is what pre-commercial thinning does. And on the right side of the on the right, we have the bar chart that shows our thinning prescription. So you can see we prioritize the retention of white spruce and we removed most of the hardwood species. And our thinning and our target density to retain trees was 2,500 stems per hectare. And during thinning, operators selected trees based on species priority, local competition, tree health, and form. So our thinning treatment kind of have captured that operational scale variability, which I think is the strength of this research, unlike other experimentally controlled thinning trials. And our site, it was located in the central sub-region of Alberta, and we had like 5 study blocks. And each of those blocks were divided into 2 treatment units, as you can see on the map on the right. And within each of those treatment units, we had randomly established 8 sample plots. So in total, we had like 80 sample plots from where we took the data. So initially, we were thinking, since white spruce is a determinate growth species where growth for the next year is predetermined by the bud formed in the previous year, and also since it has relatively slow juvenile growth compared to aspen, we kind of expected a delayed response. And on top of that, previous studies on thinning and competition control had also shown the similar results. So we were hoping that its growth responses could take several years to become evident. And here is the overview of what we did in the field. So to assess growth, we collected cores, and from these 3 cores, we measured ring widths. And the 2 scanned images here shows those ring width pattern. And if you notice closely, we can see a wider ring width from a core in a collected from a thinned stand compared to that from a control. This is just an example, but still it shows a clear visual contrast of how differently trees can respond under 2 different treatments. And also we measured various resource variables like foliar nitrogen concentration, soil moisture, and soil nitrogen and phosphorus to better understand how these resources were associated with those growth responses. So our first research question was to see how spruce trees responded to pre-commercial thinning. And for that, we calculated yearly basal area growth for each tree and compared the averages between the treatment. So as you can see, before thinning, both of these stands, they were growing pretty much similar, but right after thinning, which is in the year 2022, their growth diverged completely, with thinned stand having significantly higher basal area increment than the control. And now this tells us that thinning not only increased growth, but also it shifted the trees onto a different growth trajectory, which I think is important, because if trees are responding this early and if divergence is compounding, then that means they can reach more suitable sites sooner than expected. So from an operational point of view, what we are thinking here is that this thinning might provide 10-year boost in growth, after which the stand will be fully occupied again, and it might be in need of another silviculture treatment to keep that growth going, and that might be the right time for commercial thinning as well. So yeah, it was interesting to see how quickly these spruce trees responded within the first growing season after thinning. And here we wanted to see whether initial tree size also had an effect on the post-treatment growth. So for that, we compared the cumulative basal area increment after thinning with the initial tree size at the time of thinning. And we found that those pre-existing size differences did had an influence. As you can see, larger trees grew more regardless of the treatment. But we also can see the slope of the thinned stand is above the unthinned, which means that thinning increased growth across trees of all size classes, whether they are small, medium, or large. And this magnitude of response, it was not uniform. Trees at the lower devias, they showed the greatest relative response, while trees at the mid to the higher devias, they put on more absolute growth. So now this tells us that PCT can be a very useful management tool to improve the competitive position of these suppressed trees while favoring faster growth in the trees that are likely to contribute to the future commercial value. And as I mentioned earlier, we measured various resource variables and compared that with the cumulative basal area increment after thinning. And we found that none of these resources were associated with the growth. So that means the growth release that we saw previously, it was due to the reduction in the competition itself and not due to the changes in the resources. And lastly, we also assess competitive effects where we compared mean cumulative basal area increment with the plot mean basal area of larger trees. And this is the result from combining both thinned and the control. And as you can see, with increasing basal area with increasing competition from the larger neighbors, post-treatment growth decreased. Now, this led us to think that what was driving competition in our stands if none of the major resources were explaining the variation in the growth. So what we think here is that on such mesic sites like ours, where resources are usually not limited, competition shifts towards light. So the likely explanation here is that competition in these stands were primarily operating through light. So yeah, before I wrap up, I want to say that our finding not just tells us that pre-commercial thinning is working effectively, but also it tells us it helps to better understand that how quick responses can be once the competition for light is reduced. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Aakriti. So there is a question here, and again, if other folks, any attendees have any questions, please put it in the chat here, and we will get them. But there's two questions that have come up in here now. But one is about the soil variables and where they were taken relative to the target trees.
Wait a second. So I kind of didn't understand the first question. Like,
how were the soil variables measured?
oh, they were so we measured soil total nitrogen and soil phosphorus, and we measured that using the plant root simulator. So like we had like 4 anions and cations placed in each of those sample plots that we had, and we like measured those inorganic nitrogen content and the phosphorus from these. And
Yeah.
the other question is, so yeah, the BAL, it captured the competition from the larger trees. So each trees that we measured is showing the competition from the surrounding competition from the larger trees around that tree that we measured. So yeah, it is showing inter-specific competition, I would say, like.
Okay, and we do have a question from online here. So Sam, I see your hand is up. I'm just going to unmute you here, and you should be able to ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First thing, the chat has been disabled, so nobody's going to be able to write any questions in the chat.
Well, okay. Thank you for letting us know.
The second point is basically an observation. I study forest structures in relation to large herbivores or mega herbivores. So the work you're doing with the PCT kind of corresponds to the impacts that large herbivores have on forest structures, as in making them more open. There is a possibility to include large herbivores in your management plan. That's basically it. That's the one, the thing I wanted to say, if that's any use. Because it can help with the thinning, from as the trees are actually regenerating.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. We do have moose and deer in this area that are important wildlife species. So that it wasn't one that we've been thinking about a lot, but I have seen that from other similar studies a lot in the past. So Aakriti, that's one that we should maybe be thinking a little bit about here as we move forward with this. And I will mention these sites are being monitored kind of longer term. So I think that's going to be one of the kind of longer term questions, what those impacts might be.
Yeah, the thing with the moose and elk or deer is they do browse, but they're really not quite big enough to have a full impact. So in North America and in Eurasia, all the way across Eurasia, we had really large herbivores like elephants, mastodon, mammoth. Although we can't kind of reintroduce those easily, I mean, I would love to, but people aren't ready for that yet. But we can simulate their impacts along with controlled livestock. That's what I use those quite a lot with forest renovation, because they do the trampling impact, lots of browsing, and an absolute boost for wildlife. So yes, maybe something for the future.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, thank you very much for that. We are going to need to move on here. So I saw there was a couple of questions here. I'm just going to ask if you do have any questions and we don't get a chance to get at them. This is a pretty quick webinar here, but please follow up directly with our panelists here, and yeah, we can take the conversation from there. But now I'm going to pass it over to Nelson, who's going to introduce our next speaker.
Okay, thank you, Brad, and thank you for your everyone, for your interest. So while Miray will be starting sharing her screen, just to let you know again, we're sorry that the chat is not available. It's out of our control. Don't hesitate to send us a quick email and we'll make sure to follow up with you. Having said that, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Miray. Miray is, Miray, you're not sharing the good screen. You're sharing your email right now. There you go. So yeah, Miray, she's a PhD student doing her PhD at Université du Québec en Abitibi-Témiscamingue in silviculture. And it's a real pleasure to let her talk about one of her thesis chapter, which is coming to an end within the next couple of months. And she'll be speaking about commercial finning in that case in the boreal forest of Eastern Canada in Quebec. Alors Miray, est à toi. Unmute, Miray.
Yeah, thanks, Nelson, for the introduction. Hi, everybody. I'm really glad to be here today to present you a part of my PhD thesis, which is about above-ground carbon stocks, growth, and deadwood dynamics in boreal black spruce forests. So now we are moving to Quebec in Canada, and the study took place 20 years after treatments. So first, I'm gonna introduce you the black spruce. It is a North American boreal species with most of its distribution occurring in Canada. And it's a very important species as well in Quebec as it covers around 28% of the province. I mean the black spruce forest alone or with other species. And it is also the most important commercial conifer species because of its wood density and its fiber quality. So because of its economic and ecologic importance, various silvicultural treatments are used to optimize the productivity and the qualities and the carbon stocks of the black spruce stands. However, given the important role of boreal forest in greenhouse gas mitigation, and also the negative impact of changing climate on forest growth and resilience, such as more frequent and intense natural disturbances, as we have seen these last years, extreme droughts, wildfire, or pest disease. So it's necessary to evaluate how the management practices are shaping the forest carbon balance and their resilience. But for today's presentations, I will only focus on the carbon balance, which is primarily influenced by the growth and the mortality trajectories within the stands. So I'm going to talk about commercial thinning, which is one of the most used silvicultural treatments to manage black spruce stands. In contrast to pre-commercial thinning, it is applied at the major stage of the stands, and it consists of reducing the stand density. So by this way, we are reducing the competition for light, for water, and the soil nutrients. So it is expected to stimulate the growth of the residual trees. However, several studies have reported that thinning can increase tree mortality due to the greater exposure to wind, which can be worse in the eastern region of Quebec, which is more prone to windfall. So it remains unclear whether the growth gains of residual trees can offset the biomass removal associated with the density reduction and the loss of volume caused by increased mortality in this region. So in order to evaluate how commercial thinning is influencing the carbon dynamics of black spruce stand in this eastern region of Quebec, we first characterized the growth and mortality dynamics of the residual black spruce. And then we assess their implications for stand level carbon storage 20 years after thinning. The study took place in eastern Quebec, which is cooler weather and present less fertile soil than the western portion of the black spruce distribution range. So we made field work in 2022 And we considered unfinned stains that originated from fire in 1999 versus commercial finned stands where 35% of the basal area was harvested through a finning from below. So to reconstruct the growth and mortality dynamics, we collected increment curves from 30 living trees within each plot. And as Aakriti explained earlier, I'm not gonna go in details with the dendrochronological process, but I just want to mention that the tree ring width were converted to basal area increment, which provides a better proxy for the tree biomass. And for the dead trees, the year of mortality for the dead trees, we took transverse wood section from standing dead wood, which means snags, and also the downed woody debris. And for these dead trees, the year of mortality was defined as the year following the formation of the last annual ring. And for the above ground carbon stocks, we made vegetation inventories across all compartments. It means understory vegetation, seedlings, shrub, bryophytes. We also measured all trees and saplings. We also inventoried the coarse woody debris. And allometric equations and lab analyses were used to calculate the biomass, which have been converted into carbon according to IPCC ratios. So what did we found? First, as shown by the raw data in the left and the model predictions, we found that the trees exhibited a pronounced growth response following thinning. The finding here is represented as year 0. And we had a really high growth response as the mean basal area increment over the 20-year post-treatment period was 76% higher in the thinned plots than in the control plots. And compared to other studies conducted across North America and in the western part of Quebec, the magnitude of the growth response observed in our study is particularly high. But such positive responses to finding were reported for shade-tolerant conifers, which were growing during a long period under resource-limited conditions, such as those we found in eastern Quebec. But they conserve their capacity to respond once the canopy openness increases, such as after finding. But this high response may also have been explained by climatic differences, especially for the Western Quebec studies, where drought conditions tend to be more frequent and severe, which could have interacted with the finding and constrained the post-treatment growth responses. But we are doing further analysis about these finding-drought interactions in the final chapter of the thesis. And for the mortality dynamics, we found more downed woody debris within the thinned plots, but no significant differences in annual tree mortality, despite a slight increase in mortality right after the thinning year. In addition, we found that around 80% of the downed logs were located within 5 meters of the skid trails, which these results together suggest that the downed dead trees may have resulted from harvesting operations rather than greater exposure to wind. But further analysis and more predictors should be considered to estimate this properly. And now we're going to see how these dynamics shaped the carbon stock. So first, we found no significant differences in understory and live tree carbon stocks between the thinned and the control stands. So this suggests that the strong growth response that we found before compensated over time for the biomass removal. And on the contrary, deadwood carbon stocks were higher in the thin stands, which is certainly due to the accumulation of coarse woody debris following harvesting operations. And despite these differences, total above ground carbon stock remained similar between the two treatments. It means that the carbon from the live tree pool were transferred to the deadwood pool, where it persisted for decades rather than being directly released from the ecosystem. And this can be explained by the very slow decomposition rate that we usually found in boreal forest. Also, other results from a colleague on the same site revealed that lower soil organic carbon occurs in the forest floor of the fin stand. So this contrast highlights a potential trade-off between above ground and soil carbon pools that should be considered. Finally, the overall carbon balance of thinning should consider the harvested wood products, including their lifespan and their substitution potential. To summarize, we found that shade-tolerant conifers such as black spruce can persist under resource-limited conditions, such as those we have in our site, for a long period and still responding considerably to thinning. Our research also suggests that operational damage can generate more deadwood legacies in thin stands, but they represent a long-term on-site carbon reservoir rather than a carbon loss. So all these facts contributed to a maintained above-ground carbon stock after thinning over the medium term and underline the potential of thinning to promote timber production without compromising in-situ carbon storage. The discussion highlights also that evaluating the carbon impact of silvicultural treatments requires a broader ecosystem perspective, including over carbon pools and the long-term fate of harvested wood products. I went a little bit quickly today, but the published paper is available here if you are looking for additional methodological details or interesting discussions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miray. So we have about 2 minutes for maybe one question or two. If you have a question, you can probably raise your hand and I can unmute you. I don't see any question for now. Maybe I could ask you in less than a minute, Miray, can you tell us a bit about another part of the work you've been doing in your PhD, and you can meanwhile stop the sharing. So, for example, your first chapter, you looked at other silvicultural treatments.
Yeah, in part of my PhD, we considered another silvicultural treatments, which is site preparation, specifically scarification. We chose this because we are looking at the first stage of succession and on the mature stage later. So the scarification is within the first stage of the succession. And we were doing the same thing, analyzing how the scarification is impacting the carbon stocks of every vegetation compartment, but with a bigger focus on the understory. And as I said during the presentation, in the last chapter of my PhD, we are going to go further with the interaction between thinning and drought. So we are considering over black spruce stands in the western part of Quebec and compared with a different context of drought intensities and frequencies.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, and with that, I'll let Karen take over and introduce our next speaker. Thank you again, Miray.
Thank you,
Nils. Okay, yeah, thank you. So next speaker is Alfred Deutgen. You're a PhD student at Skogforsk and the SLU, Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences. And you will talk about your research and part of your project.
Yes, thank you, Karin. So my project, you can call it the early management of spruce birch mixtures in southern Sweden. I'll focus on both the spruce and birch part, and not just only the spruce. Hope you can see everything all right. The forestry cycle of Sweden, or you could say the most common practice, especially in southern Sweden, is you start with planting of spruce. Then you will have a lot of birch coming in with natural regeneration. You do a pre-commercial thinning with a brush saw to remove lower the stem density, and then you will perform 1 to 3 thinnings, where you also remove quite a lot of the broadleaves that are left, and in the end you will do a final felling, where most of the time it's either spruce or pine left. The planting of spruce is also quite often with improved material or breeded material of spruce, so they have a higher growth. Should come back to why that's important. Mixed forests in theory are for increasing diversity in spruce forest. They can decrease pests and pathogens. They are a risk diversification. They can improve soils. They will have future seed trees for other species. There's a diversification on landscape level and stand level, and could also prevent root rot spreading from tree to tree. And spruce birch mixtures that's when you have then almost the time natural regeneration of birch with planted spruce. There are a total of 16% of the mixed forest with birch in mature production forests, and 99% of birch in Sweden are in a mixture, and 13% of Swedish wood volume is birch. So that's where they're in the mixtures. And the birch is used for pulpwood to 90%. Large quantities also imported from nearby countries, since the demand have been quite high. Birch that are in good quality can also be sawn to some extent, but also exported to countries with larger sawmills. While spruce, for example, that's the most important tree species in southern Sweden in terms of production, since it generates logs, and we saw it a lot, and for the pulpwood as well. And 80% of the birch volume comes from thinning, while most of the volume from spruce comes from the final felling. So utilizing the birch in practice together with spruce is mainly done by that the birch fills in the gaps where the planted spruce has died. So it's to have a higher stem density, and this can also be on individual level. If there's one spruce that's died, then you can replace it with a natural regeneration of birch, or even on patch level where it has become a bigger a damage event. It's also, the longer you can keep the birch in the stand, the longer you have this insurance of, if something happens to the spruce on a large scale, you can always have a tree that can that is maybe undamaged. Or you can also not plant spruce in, for example, wet areas where a birch will come up well and do well as well, maybe even compared to spruce. So that's also a strategy, but then you get a patch mixture. Birch can also be used for shelter wood, similar to what's in Canada, but instead of aspen, it's birch, and it has been traditionally used for preventing frost damage on spruce. So if you have a frost damage area, this can be used in that way, and that can also generate pulpwood and biomass when you then remove the shelter wood. But of course, there's also the problem with birch that which is why we traditionally in the 1960s used Agent Orange to remove it. It's that it reduces growth on spruce or they outcompete spruce quite severely if left untreated, you could say. And it can also cause abrasion damage. So it's important to remove it in time as well. And when you remove it first time, of course, the birch sprouts will come up a second time and cause the same problem. And there's another dimension to mixtures that is maybe sometimes forgotten, is that there's a height relationship, which is quite hard to predict. So it's something you have to kind of stay flexible with when you come in and decide what to do in a stand. So for example, if you have 2 to 5 meters tall and they are the same height, since birch is a pioneer species, it will it grows fast when it's a pioneer species, and the spruce is a secondary species which traditionally grows slowly. But if they are at the same height, the spruce will outcompete birch quite rapidly, especially on fertile soils and on when the spruce is breeded or improved, which is good for the spruce management, bad for the birch. In another situation, you might have the birch is slightly taller than the spruce, in which this would be maybe the optimal for creating a single-story mixture. You can also have this kind of awkward middle zone where the birch is taller than the spruce, in that sense that spruce will lose growth and also get damaged by the spruce from abrasion and so on. But we will not really gain so much from having the birch. And then you have, of course, the shelter wood, where you have those previously mentioned benefits. You can also have patch mixtures or intimate mixtures, and they also have pros or cons. We have that with if you want the intimate mixture, maybe you have a patch mixture, you have to maybe remove spruce to really make it work, and you lose the potential of mixture benefits. However, we have seen that you can have increased biodiversity from having the birch. You can have it long term since it's easier to manage, while in the intimate mixtures, you can leave most of the planted or survived spruce, and you can remove the birch in the thinnings instead, which also increases flexibility. And this is also better against pathogen and pest. However, it will be harder to keep the birch until final felling and with high production. So for my study with the spruce birch mixture, we look at the research objective is to understand the management for keeping birch growing and integrating it more successfully in a mixed stand, and to know when and how it is a good idea to create a mixture or monoculture. Also looking at how the birch affects the spruce in different ways. So the experiment I will present is there are 3 sites in southern Sweden where the spruce is between 1 to 2 meters with the latest improved material. And in the establishment, the first pre-commercial thinnings was done, and then a second pre-commercial thinning was done later, and then remeasured, and then remeasured again in 2024. So the treatment we have, if the establishment site, we split it up into 4 parts. We do the first pre-commercial thinning, and we have a control where nothing happens. We have where we remove the birch. We do a spot treatment, and also a mixture where we keep 2,000 plus 2,000 stems per hectare. Then we do the second treatment, which is do nothing. We remove the birch from the control. We let the birch sprouts come up. We remove the birch sprouts. We merge these 2 together, and then we have a sparse mixture. So we keep 500 of the biggest stems from each species. A dense mixture, we keep the larger 1,000 stems, and also one where we remove the spruce in favor of the birch. And so the research questions are if early or late competition release affects the growth on spruce, if a second PCT when we remove the stumps sprouts affect the growth on spruce. And also we compare the spruce birch mixtures to the business as usual monoculture counterpart. And at the start, so in revision 1, after the second pre-commercial thinning, there was no height difference of any kind in any of the, also between species, which also indicates that the birch is, in that sense, it's not an optimal height relationship, it's the same height, which of course is will make it harder for the birch to survive, and it will not compete with the spruce in that same way. And then there's a, what do you say, theoretical selection effect from doing a pre-commercial thinning that maybe is also, it's affecting the results that has to be considered, which is if we have a forest with 2,000 spruce and we get the 10,000 stems per hectare birch. When you do a pre-commercial thinning and remove all the birch, you have 2,000 stems left, the same trees that you had from before, the same spruce. And then when you remove the birch stumps again, you have still the same 2,000 spruces. When you do a mixture and slowly remove, you can first have the ability to select the larger birch. Then in the second, but with, of course, with that you have increased competition because of high stem density. So that's something that would lower the growth. But then in the second pre-commercial thinning, you have the ability to select the larger spruce and the larger birch and still keep 2,000 stems per hectare. So if we look at the basal area from all these treatments, we see that the mixed dense has the highest basal area, but not significantly different from the pre-commercially thin 2 times or the ones that is late thinned. Another point here is that the mixed spars is not significantly different from any of the fully spruce stands, which is quite interesting. And if we just compare then to answer the questions on the spruce stands, did the birch sprouts have effect on growth? No, they did not. And the difference between removing early versus a late pre-commercial thinning is that the late has a higher growth than the early one, and probably from the release effect that you can see. But they're not significantly different in terms of mean diameter, but in growth they are. And also, of course, there is the effect between the control and the late, and so because they are more comparable to each other since they were from the same starting treatment. And then you have spruce in the mixture, and here we can see that this is the estimated mean diameter is partly the result of the selection effect, but also, of course, of growth. So it's a combined effect. But the mixed dense spruce is larger than the business as usual 2 times pre-commercially thinned spruce, and the mixed spars is even larger. And mixed spars also has a higher growth than both mixed dense and the combined pre-commercial thinning. And if you look at the birch in the mixer, we see that the mixed sparse birch is larger than the mixed dense birch, and that the mixed sparse birch grows as well as the birch monoculture. So it doesn't have the same growth relationship as the spruce. The spruce got significantly higher in the sparse while the birch didn't. And also the individual diameter growth model for both species. And what we could see that from this is that the birch in the mixture is not dominant at all. They are only co-dominant or intermediate. So only the spruce were actually the dominant trees after, or even before the revision 1, so after the first pre-commercial thinning. And the largest birch grows worse than the smallest spruce in this case, on all sites. And decreasing stem density increases the growth for the spruce relatively more than the birch. So to interpret these results, I would say that the birch in sparse mixture has a higher chance for long-term production, but as basal area increases in the stand, it will also struggle for space too. However, it prolongs the point of when it would be completely outcompeted. Monoculture patches probably is the best option for long-term survival and growth for both species. Definitely for the birch. For the spruce, you of course lose the mixture effect that you could have. That could be, for pest and pathogen, abiotic and biotic damages, of course. So depending on how you want to see that. And the improved material of spruce competes strongly against natural regeneration of birch on fertile soils. And the stronger you do your pre-commercial thinning, that delays the birch suppression. Thank you. Do we have any questions?
I don't know. Do we have any questions?
I might have a question for you, Alfred, if there's no one else raising their hand.
Yeah, I cannot see any hands. So yeah, so please, Nelson.
Okay,
Go ahead.
thanks. Thanks, Alfred. There are some studies that show how intra-specific competition, so competition within the same species, can be very high because you have the same you have individuals from the same species who are trying to get the same resources at the same time of the year and all that, versus interspecific competition where species can access resources at different places in the ecosystem or at different times. So can you comment on that based on what you've observed in your research? Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's always with the mixture effect that does it exist or does it not exist? And it's also hard with comparing birch and spruce, and spruce is so improved in the material. It's the effect from birch is quite small, I would say, in the competition. So and the birch quite suffers fast from having spruce. What would be like more the mixture effect would be in a shelter wood where you really uses the pioneer effect from the birch, and then you get this larger just how they grow, and then you can utilize that. But that's a special scenario. But they use the intraspecific, if they use a different resources, I think there is very limited effect on that for spruce and birch. It's more effect of other benefits of damage resistance and stuff like that, and maybe crown size and who knows, but not so much resource light and below ground resources, I would say.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any more questions or comments? We have 2 more minutes left in this webinar. I don't know, I was thinking this with herbivores was raised after the first presentation, and I think we have seen many similarities here in the way we manage our forest, but I think herbivore is one of the things that might differ. So yeah, I don't know, Alfred, if you would like to say anything about like how herbivores affect these mixtures in Sweden.
Well, not removing all the birch as soon as it comes up, so letting it have some forage for the ungulate seems to be a good thing for the moose to browse on a landscaping level to feed the moose, you could say, or the other ungulates around. So by just completely removing it very early on might not be so good. And also discussed before, I think, with Brad, how you have a lot of aspen in Canada, which is also a favorite of moose. And I think if we would have more aspen in Sweden, probably we would see a different browsing problem. So yeah, keeping a lot of broadleaves trees in especially in the young forest I think is quite important.
Yeah, I think time's up. Nelson or Brad, do you have anything to add before we wrap up?
No, one thing I wanted to say was just thanks everybody for attending. And again, follow up if you have any more questions. And hopefully we got some great turnout today. So hopefully we can do this again in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So thank you everyone for listening. And yeah, like Brad said, please get back to us if you have any more questions regarding what you heard about today.
Yeah. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Yeah, you too. Bye.